Wait, you thought the Powerpuff Girls was just a cartoon? Three cute kindergartners punching monsters before bedtime. Harmless Saturday morning fun, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because hiding underneath all that pink and sugar was a show quietly teaching you about drug addiction, workplace sexism, psychological abuse, feminist theory, and a villain so disturbing that academics have written entire papers about him. You watched it as a child and understood nothing. Watch it again as an adult, and you won't be able to look away. This is what the Powerpuff Girls was actually about. Equal fights and the feminist trap. The episode Equal Fights aired in season 4 and is one of the most politically sophisticated pieces of animation the show ever produced, and one of the most uncomfortable. A villain named Femme Fatale targets only men in her crimes, and when the girls try to stop her, she convinces them that arresting her would be anti-feminist. She invokes the names of Susan B., Anthony, and other real suffragettes to argue that female criminals should be treated differently than male ones. The girls, eager to prove their feminist credentials, allow her to continue operating. The episode's conclusion is that genuine equality means accountability applies to everyone, regardless of gender, and that invoking feminism as a shield for bad behavior is itself a betrayal of feminist principles. This is not a debate that most adults were having openly in 2002. It is a nuanced, internally contested philosophical argument about the limits and applications of feminist theory. It was delivered in an episode of a cartoon watched primarily by children under 10. The show trusted its audience to eventually grow up and understand what it had been told. The darkness the show never explained. Beyond the political subtext and the adult jokes, the Powerpuff Girls contains episodes of genuine psychological darkness that have no explanation, no redemption arc, and no lesson. Just horror, dressed in pastel. In Speed Demon, the girls travel decades into the future and find a Townsville destroyed by him, not because him attacked it, but because the people of Townsville, feeling abandoned by the girls who left, allowed their grief to curdle into hatred. The city blames the girls for not saving them. The future is a ruin of resentment. The girls return to the present shattered. There is no villain to punch. There is no crime to stop. There is only the knowledge that the people they love will eventually turn on them if they ever stop performing. That is an anxiety about conditional love that most adults have never seen articulated that cleanly. In Twisted Sister, the girls attempt to create a fourth sister, Bunny, who is described as intellectually slower than the other three and physically different from them. Bunny dies at the end of the episode in a self-sacrificial explosion. She is briefly mourned, never mentioned again. A character created specifically to be coded as disabled was introduced, killed, and erased, and the show moved on without comment. It is one of the most disturbing things the series did, precisely because it did not treat it as disturbing. Then there is Mime for a Change, in which a clown named Rainbow falls into bleach and transforms into Mr. Mime, a figure who drains the color from everything he touches, leaving Townsville gray and silent and still. The episode is a meditation on depression that does not use the word. The world the girls fight to protect is literally drained of joy by a figure they cannot simply punch into submission. The enemy is not a monster. The enemy is the absence of everything that makes life worth living. For a Saturday morning cartoon, that is a remarkably mature place to go. The accident that started everything. The show was created by Craig McCracken, who first developed the concept as a student at the California Institute of the Arts. His original short was called Whoop-Ass Stew, and the three girls were, accordingly, the Whoop-Ass Girls. Cartoon Network softened the name for broadcast, but the spirit remained intact. McCracken's stated goal was simple. He wanted to draw little girls in a tough environment. That contrast was really nice to me, he told interviewers. Cute and brutal, soft and lethal. That tension was the entire show. The origin story of Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup is itself a piece of carefully constructed subtext. Professor Utonium, a lone male scientist, creates three girls in a laboratory by combining sugar, spice, and everything nice. He is making, as the narrator announces without irony, the perfect little girls. He does not ask them what they want to be. He decides what they should be made of, and then he makes them. The fact that this is presented as wholesome and loving does not erase what it actually is: a man engineering female identity from scratch, according to his own specifications for perfection. The show opens with its deepest theme in the very first 30 seconds, wrapped in a catchy song and a pink explosion. The irony, and it is a rich one, is that McCracken himself insisted he never thought of the girls as girls. I don't think of them as girls. I think of them as kids," he told Salon in 2002. "We've never said, 'What would a girl do?' It's always, 'What would a kid do?' And yet the show spent 6 seasons dissecting exactly what it means to be a girl, what society expects of them, what boxes they are put in, and what happens when those boxes do not fit. The creator's disavowal is almost part of the point. The most honest feminist statements are often the ones nobody realized they were making. 3 girls, 3 boxes, 1 impossible standard. Look at Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, not as cartoon characters but as archetypes. And the show becomes a gender studies lecture in disguise. Each girl represents one socially sanctioned version of femininity. And the show presents all 3 not as complete human beings but as categories. Blossom is the smart one, the leader, the achiever. Bubbles is the sensitive one, the emotional one, the cute one. Buttercup is the tough one, the aggressive one, the one who is constantly coded as the least conventionally feminine and therefore the most in need of justification. The Powerpuff Girls exemplify third-wave feminism through their duality of strength and femininity, as scholars noted in academic analyses of the show. But the show is also quietly aware of the trap embedded in that duality. The narrator who introduces the show describes the ingredients chosen to create the perfect little girl. And the word perfect is doing enormous work there. Perfect by whose standard? The professors. Societies. The same society that the girls spend every episode rescuing, only to return home before bedtime and do their homework. Head writer Amy Keating Rogers has spoken about the deliberate choice to focus on universal childhood experiences rather than specifically feminine ones. The terror of an evil substitute teacher, the humiliation of wetting the bed, the loss of a first tooth. The decision was radical in its simplicity. These are not girl problems. They are child problems. And by placing them on the shoulders of superheroes, the show made the radical argument that being a child is itself a kind of superpower, and also a kind of trap. The girls can punch a monster into orbit. They cannot stay up past bedtime. The mayor, Ms. Bellum, and the architecture of power. The adults in charge of Townsville are one of the show's sharpest and most sustained pieces of social commentary, and almost nobody over the age of 7 caught it in real time. The mayor is a small, bumbling, cheerful man entirely dependent on the 3 kindergartners he calls at every crisis. He cannot solve a single problem independently. He is charming, likable, and completely useless, a figure of institutional authority with none of the competence that authority requires. He represents something the show returns to again and again: the man given the title, the office, and the hotline, none of which he has earned or can use effectively. Miss Sarah Bellum, the mayor's secretary, is his opposite in every way. She is intelligent, competent, calm under pressure, and the person who actually runs Townsville. She is also, in the show's most glaring visual critique, literally headless in most shots. Her face is never shown. She exists from the neck down. Curves, red hair, the body of a woman who is powerful, but whose identity, whose face, whose interiority, the camera refuses to grant her. The show is clearly aware of this. It is the point. Here is the most capable adult in the city, and the frame will not show you her face, because the world she operates in does not care what her face looks like. The dynamic between the mayor and Miss Bellum mirrors something achingly familiar: a male figurehead and the competent woman doing the actual work behind him, receiving none of the credit, her identity cropped out of the frame. The show ran from 1998 to 2005. It was aimed at children, and it was conducting an unflinching audit of workplace gender dynamics that most primetime dramas would not touch. The drug episode, the unplanned pregnancy joke, and the rest of what sailed over your head. The show's adult content is not accidental. It is systematic, layered, and delivered with the calm confidence of a writing room that knew exactly what it was doing and trusted that the kids in the audience would not notice, and the adults watching alongside them absolutely would. The episode, Mojo Jonesin, is, without ambiguity, an episode about drug addiction. Mojo Joe approaches a group of children in a dark alleyway wearing a trench coat and offers them Chemical X. The children get addicted. They behave in ways that mirror withdrawal and craving. The episode ends with a direct message: when someone like Mojo Joe offers you something like Chemical X, just say no. The show is so on the nose about this that it barely qualifies as subtext. It is text, and it aired on a Saturday morning children's network. Then there is the episode where a girl named Robin moves in next door and becomes friends with the girls. Robin learns the girls were created by accident In a lab experiment, she reassures the sheepish professor that she, too, was an accident. This is a joke about unplanned pregnancy, delivered with a timing so dry that most adults watching it had to replay it to confirm what they had just heard. It also carries a secondary layer of darkness. Robin has clearly overheard her parents refer to her that way. A children's show just depicted a child who knows she was unwanted by her own parents and played it for a laugh. That is not children's television writing. That is prestige drama writing in a 9-minute runtime. The Sedusa storyline runs on workplace sexual manipulation. The villain disguises herself as Miss Bellum and seduces the mayor into giving her what she wants, using physical contact and suggestion in ways the show never explains to its younger viewers, but that every adult in the room understood immediately. The episode even has the audacity to place the word seduce in the villain's name and present it as a children's character, H.I.M., the most terrifying character in Saturday morning history. And then there is H.I.M. H.I.M. is introduced by the narrator as a creature so sinister, so despicable, that even to pronounce his name causes fear in the hearts of men. He is, visually, a figure dressed in a red suit with thigh-high heeled boots, a fluffy collar, lobster claw hands, and a face painted with theatrical feminine makeup. His voice shifts between a high, soft register and a deep, distorted growl, depending on how threatened he feels. He lives in a dimension that resembles a fever dream crossed with a Victorian parlor, crossed with hell. Academic Dr. Meters W. Bichowski, who has studied him extensively, described what makes him uniquely terrifying. This so-called confusion erupts from discord between high-toned male voice, which echoes over itself, as though existing in a state of flux and multiplicity that will not settle into a univocal chord. Likewise, his clothes signify beyond easily legible codes of gender, a mixture of a sexy Mrs. Claus, a dominatrix, and a ballerina. If him is the devil, then he traces from the same genealogy of sugar, spice, and everything nice that the girls do. Him does not fight the girls physically. He does not threaten Townsville with a giant robot or a weather machine. Him is a psychological torturer. His specialty is attacking the things the girls love and trust most, their father, their friends, the city itself, and turning those things against them. In one episode, he uses his powers to make the people of Townsville physically assault the girls. The mayor, their teacher Miss Keene, and Professor Utonium himself all turn on them. The girls, who are always kind and helpful, must fight back against the very people they exist to protect. The trauma embedded in that scenario is not subtle. Him also represents something the show never fully resolves and perhaps never meant to: the question of queer identity in a space that does not know how to hold it. Every major character in the show represents a legible, socially comprehensible category. Him represents none. He refuses to perform gender in any recognizable way. He blurs lines with what Bichowski calls menacing glee, and the show presents that blurring as the source of his terror. The most frightening thing in Townsville is not a monster with a weapon. It is a being that will not be categorized. That is a deeply adult observation about how society responds to the unclassifiable. What the show was actually doing all along. The Powerpuff Girls ran for 6 seasons, between 1998 and 2005, and attracted an audience far beyond its stated demographic. Adults watched it not just because they were in the room with their children, but because the show was rewarding them independently. It was doing 2 things simultaneously: entertaining children with color and action and slapstick, while delivering, in the same frame, a running commentary on feminism, institutional failure, psychological trauma, gender fluidity, the exploitation of female capability, and the impossible standards placed on girls who are expected to be both powerful and perfect. Craig McCracken said he wanted little cute girls in a really tough environment because that contrast was really nice. What he built was something richer than contrast. He built a show that looked like a children's cartoon and functioned like a cultural document, one that encoded an entire generation's anxieties about gender, power, and identity into a format that could be broadcast at 8 a.m. on a Saturday without triggering a single standards review. The children who watched it grew up, and when they re-watched it as adults, as parents, as students, as people who had lived through the world the show was quietly describing, they finally heard what it had been saying all along. It was never about 3 little girls saving a city. It was about what the world asks of girls who are capable of saving everything, and what it does to them when they try. It was about a society that calls to its most powerful members only in emergencies, and sends them home before bedtime. It was about the exhausting, relentless performance of being exactly what everyone else needs you to be, without ever asking what you need yourself. And it was wrapped in the most disarming packaging imaginable. Pink, round, cheerful, and aimed at 6-year-olds. Because that is exactly how the most radical ideas have always traveled. Hidden in plain sight, disguised as something safe, waiting for the audience to grow up enough to understand what they had already been told.